All right, we're going to get started in a couple minutes. All right, so I think we'll get started if everybody can find their seats. Our next presentation is going to be about upgrading your software systems. And Brian from Kittitas County is, nope, Heather. Brian and Heather. Brian and Heather will be presenting this one, so I will let you guys introduce yourself.
Okay, great. I'm Brian. I'm the Kittitas County Auditor. I know pretty much everybody here, so that should come as no surprise. But Heather and I were thinking that we should help everybody wrap up this conference with something really fun and light and easy, which is financial software upgrades, overhauls, conversions, whatever we want to, however we want to classify this category work. So that's me.
And I'm Heather Joby. I'm the Klickitat County Auditor. Yeah, that's me.
Okay. So I've got a slide deck. I think because Heather and I were talking about this over the last couple of days, I'm going to kind of buzz through this thing. What we're hoping for, and this goes to the folks online as well, is kind of an interactive thing. So everybody in the room probably has, well, certainly has experience with the challenges and opportunities of financial software. Many of us have been through upgrades or conversions, redesigning business processes and policies to support those activities. So there's a ton of knowledge in the room, and there's a ton of knowledge online. So I'm going to go through the slide deck. This is something I put together. I guest taught a college class, and so it's formatted in that sense, but really it's a conversation piece. So as you guys see things that bring thoughts or ideas or things that you want to share or questions you have, I think we can kind of just do it that way. But this is how Kittitas County is currently going through what I characterize as an overhaul of our financial software, which is Kayenta. It's a product developed by Harris Computer. We've had it for about 30 years. We're about 10 years overdue on an upgrade. It was in its current version, which is version 7.9, it's truly just financial software. It's your AP, general ledger, payroll. It has a time entry thing, but it's only available through Core, which means you have to be like an accountant to use time entry. So not Kayenta users in its current form in the county, there's like 15 people out of 400 that use Kayenta. But in our future state, which we'll talk about, everybody's going to touch Kayenta in at least some way or another, because we have the Connect applications, which are web-based for people to view like their employee info and their Connect, their time entry. So it's technically challenging, but the more challenging part, and I think that many of you will resonate with this, is how to implement it into the environment that is county government. So this is what we look like currently. I put this up here so hopefully nobody feels bad about their mess of different systems, because ours is kind of a disaster. But I'm not going to go through this in detail, but basically these are all the main platforms we have. We have over here on the left, we use QuickBooks for receivables, because we don't have a miscellaneous receivables module. That's something we're changing. Camus is a highly overdeveloped internal SharePoint that we have that IT wants to completely get rid of and kill, because it's huge technical debt and bandwidth for them to maintain. But it does a lot of the like how did departments interact with Kayenta. Basically, Camus is like the way that they do it. Like all the vouchers go through Camus, all the employee info. If we're doing past personnel action forms, it's all through Camus. That they want to completely deconstruct Camus and just make it basically a true SharePoint rather than like a platform for like workflow processes. We have NovaTime, which is third-party timekeeping, paying extra for that. We have CashTax. I was listening yesterday, and we were talking about the Schedule 6, and we were talking about treasurers and separate cash receipting. Well, that's ours right there. CashTax. Who has CashTax here? Who knows that their treasurer has it? I only know of one other county, which is Skagit. So I think that's probably true. CashTax is like a really overdeveloped cash receipting software that does a lot of things that your financial software should do. So, but we're going to get rid of that. And then Simpro is investment, so that'll stay. And then we have Kayenta way over on the right, which is our financial software.
Yep, go ahead.
So we also have Kayenta and have had it for about 30 years. I don't know if any of you've ever been to Du Bois, Wyoming, and I asked them one time why it was Du Bois and not Dubois, and the response was, well, we're just not that fancy. Klickitat County is just not that fancy. So we have Kayenta, and our treasurer uses Ascend for his property tax, and then uploads that into Kayenta. So we only use 2 software systems.
So here's our work group. So this was like kind of our process. We started looking at this within about 6 months of me coming on board. It was something that I inherited. It was going to be, and this is maybe like just a good like example of like stakeholdering and maybe some lessons learned. Because when I came on board, it was pretty much like hey, we're going to do this thing and like we're just going to do it, and IT is going to help us, and we'll hit the button and it'll all be good. So I didn't know much, but I knew enough to be like, it just doesn't pass the common sense test. So we had a meeting with Kayenta. Their leadership came in June to like basically sign contracts, and I was like, pump the brakes. I don't even know if we're going to stay with you guys. So that was an interesting conversation. So we ended up going through this process. This is all 2023, where we pulled together a work group of like people who interact with the software. So it involved treasurer, it involved public works. They're pretty heavily involved in it. The sheriff's office was in the room. We had obviously my office. We had IT, and we just explored. Well, first off, we mapped out our current system, and then we looked at options, whether we wanted to do, stay with current system and just basically upgrade everything that we have, which would be like the easy $200,000 solution, but it wouldn't change any of our business processes. We looked at going all the way and doing an RFP for like Oracle or Workday. But this is a good time to ask a question. Here's what I discovered, and I don't know if anybody's going to prove me wrong in here. Who loves their financial software or their ERP or whatever you have? Who absolutely just thinks it's the best thing ever? That's what I learned, right? That's what I learned. Thank you for validating me, because I get this as we've gone through Kayenta, and we've uncovered things that were like, man, I wish that was different, or they could do that different. And I get the occasional complaint from a commissioner or another elected, like, man, why didn't we go with Workday? Or I heard Munis is really good. And I'm like, everybody hates their platform. They all suck. If anybody can develop a good one, you'll be a multi-billionaire. But nobody has. So we went with Kayenta because it seemed like it was like the Goldilocks option, right? Like we could do like the bare minimum. We could do like all the way do a conversion and still not get what we want. Or we could do what we're calling an overhaul, which is Kayenta plus the human capital module, the Miss AR module, so we can start, and the Connect application, so we can start getting out of the business of all these other third-party duct tape and baling wire solutions. So that's kind of how we ended up deciding this is the route we're going to go.
So we started in 2020 when the COVID money started rolling in. The commissioners held a workshop with all of the department heads and electeds to try to get some sense of what they should spend the money on. And sometime end of 2020, beginning of 2021, the decision was made to upgrade our financial system. And we've had Kayenta, but we've kind of piecemealed it. We had a more comprehensive system than Kittitas did, but we had customized the software to fit our processes rather than customizing our processes to fit the software, which was really probably one of our biggest issues. And so we had this kind of cobbled together system. And frankly, none of us thought that we would wind up staying with Kayenta. We were all convinced we'd go some other direction. But so in 2021, the decision was made to hire a consultant to help us find a software vendor. And for those of you who've been around a while, you know that there's some contention and some history around the financial system and processes in Klickitat County. So in 2022, an ERP or a request for proposals, RFP, there we go, went out for the consultant. So we hired a consultant and they brought, I believe, 9 vendors to the table to give us presentations. And we winnowed it down and ultimately went with Kayenta and signed a contract in January of 2024 that was supposed to be a 12-month process. We were going to go live in January of 2025. If we go live in January of 2026, we will be lucky.
Such is the nature of these projects. So nobody can feel bad if you're in that situation. So this is not my web diagram. It'd probably be better if I formatted it that way, but this is essentially our future state. So if you remember the web diagram, we had all these other different softwares, and then we're going towards new Kayenta version. Everything that's highlighted is new. And you can see that it's taking the place of some of the stuff we had on the left, right? Like Novatime dies. I've already fired Novatime. It was really hard because they were like the nicest people in the world. No pushback at all. They were like, "Oh yeah, man, let's see what we can do to help you with this transition." It's like, I feel terrible right now. But that was great. I want to get out of the QuickBooks business. Whose departments use QuickBooks that you know of? Like for off books receivables and stuff. Oh my God, the sheriffs. Our airport department dissolved in early, like this time last year, and they had a director and they had an admin assistant. The admin assistant had a password protected QuickBooks, keeping off book financials, receivables, grant info, all sorts of stuff. Well, she gets fired because the department dissolves, and it was a nightmare to get into her QuickBooks account. So QuickBooks in my county and in my finance department is kind of like an inside joke because I'm on a crusade. We will eliminate QuickBooks. So that's my mission right there. And then IT is on that similar crusade, getting rid of Camus because it's a huge technical debt for them. Yeah, this was more for the college kids, but basically having a project team is important. So everybody is highlighted is people who are in my office. Obviously, you see a lot of a crossover in different areas of responsibility. All the tools that we're using on the right, these are just like standard project management tools for either managing the schedule, execution, or project development. I spend most of my time in this one right here, which is like their testing. It's testing, and it's also where you like make your incidents. I don't know how anybody's experience is with other vendors, but like sending them an email and asking them to do a thing is not a thing. Like everything must be done through an incident. So it's like a case management system. Here was our original roadmap that they had. So we started in May of 2024. We signed contracts basically a year ago. We did our kickoff in May of 2024. I did not find this is their product. I didn't find it especially helpful, but it does show essentially is the same. 11, 12 months is like standard is what's mapped out for these projects. Here's a more detailed timeline that just kind of shows like the different like major steps. This is a little bit dated now because I pulled it back in January. But basically like the main milestones of this project, and I'm sure many people can relate to this, is like we did our kickoff, and then they did the environment setup in our servers. They did an Oracle to SQL conversion. I just know that's a big, do you know anything about that? I just know that IT did the thing. It was very IT involved. So, and they said it's great and they love it. So I was like, okay, cool. They did a new product feature discovery and training. This was probably like the one that if I could go back and do it over again, I would have spent a lot more time doing. We really kicked this off like June, July of last year. I had some Army training, so I was out. I came back and they were like, yeah, you guys are really behind on getting us your info. And so we did, but we did it fast. And so there was stuff that we definitely missed that's now coming back to bite us. And an example would be like they sent us an MLA structure. So MLA is multi-level approval. It's how you route different workflows for like AP, or you route different workflows. This is the one that's killing us for time entry, like user to supervisor to approver to payroll. And we got that to them quick, fast, and in a hurry. And now we're having to go back and fix a lot of stuff that we either missed or was incorrect or has quite simply changed since July of last year. So, so that would be an area that, you know, I would call out as like, we did not execute that part of the project very well. And then we really got into testing in September. We tried to split that between our group of about a dozen people who are really, you know, taking different areas of the software. End user training. This is one, I'm going to skip ahead real quick. So end user training, we actually started this way earlier than they wanted us to. This is an updated slide, but we started in December. I've been messaging this to management team since we kicked off the project last summer. But in December, we were like, hey, everybody needs to start getting Kayenta access. Who's going to have it? So we developed a tier system, like tiers 1 through 6. It's tier 6 is the highest. We call that God level. Like there's 4 people in the county, myself, the budget and finance director, actually 3 people now because we were down 1 person, but assistant finance director, budget and finance director, myself, we're God level. So we can like do everything, give permissions. And then below that, you go into like central finance accounting, and then you go down into like department admin assistants, and then you go down to like managers, and then the level 1, which is like people who are the roads crew or the deputies who are literally just entering their time. But everybody has a part to play. We kicked that off in December, like getting people access. And thank God we did, because we're on track, but we're like 70% of the way there. And it's been a 3-month process of getting people the right access, getting them in the right hierarchy, fixing their MLA. And that was one that, you know, Kayenta said, you're doing it way too early, but I'm glad we started when we did. So that's just something in mind. Yep, go ahead.
Just a quick question. So like our system, we're on Central Square. I think there's a few in the state, but not in well, maybe one county. They may have dropped out. Do you use web-based and is it cloud-based? Our IT department is just very leery of doing anything cloud-based. That's one issue. Then part of the problem is we have customized it so much that, you know, typically the benefit would be that they would be doing upgrades behind the scenes and not having to get into our servers and doing that. But because of those upgrades or those changes that we've made, it makes it next to impossible to go to the cloud. And I just was wondering your thoughts on that, if your IT had any concerns, et cetera, with our data being exposed.
I'm gonna go first, and then I think you guys did a little bit different than us. But ours is, we have some cloud backup, but ours is primarily on servers. So like when they were doing all their environmental configuration and their environment setup and their configuration, they're in our servers doing it. And IT is fine with that. They're very heavily involved, right? And IT and the vendor Kayenta do a lot of direct crosstalk to coordinate those activities. But everybody seems fine with it, so.
So we went from a hosted server on site to cloud-based, which is part of the headache that we're going through now. We've had some VPN tunnel. I don't know. I can throw out these words. I really don't know what they mean, but so we've had some issues with that, but we are absolutely going cloud-based. IT really didn't have a choice. I mean, they gave us some pushback about why are you doing this, and we being myself, the treasurer, and the finance director for Public Works, just decided it was a step the county needed to take for accessibility, ease of use. So IT just had to get on board. In terms of the configuration, one of the things we have to keep reiterating with the vendor is that, because they ask us, well, what's your process? well, it doesn't matter what our process is now, that we had so many problems because we had over customized and only taken pieces of systems that were designed to work together. And so patches that they pushed out didn't quite work, that, they fixed one thing, but they created another problem. And so we have had to reiterate to the vendor that, no, we're going to change our processes as necessary to fit your software package rather than customizing.
Yeah, that's a good question. That was a good question.
Did you have any issues with data going to the cloud when you were previously, hosted on a server and then going to the cloud? Was your data pretty well intact?
We're not quite there yet, so I can't entirely answer that question.
Okay.
We also decided this was a good time to entirely restructure our GL and clean up everything as we move. So there have been some challenges. I think we'll figure it out, but it's not without its bumps and bruises.
So I can add a little bit to that. In Thurston County, we went live last July with Oracle, and we also took the opportunity to process map our current state and our future state. We had GFOA that helped us through that. We reconfigured the chart of accounts and took out the project segment based on the recommendation of the implementation partner and GFOA. And that's been fun. So the projects and grants module has had some challenges, some reconfiguring. However, we also just had our exit conference with the state auditor, and one of the most nerve-wracking parts was the migration we went from Munis to Oracle, and we balanced to the penny. So that was wonderful. However,
That's awesome.
we're a little bit behind in our ACFR, and there are a lot of lessons learned, but you will get there. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great input too. And it sounds Thurston County, you guys were doing a conversion, right? You were going from one software to another. Yeah, that's even like next level from the overhaul. What I characterize ours. What's that? 4 softwares. Yeah, that's a big lift. So yeah, I think the biggest call out I'd have on this slide was just starting if you're going from a system or a current state where like 15 people use your software and you're going to everybody using it, start that super early, because getting people access and in the right hierarchy is a multi-month process, partly just because it's dependent upon people who aren't on your direct team doing things and then giving you feedback. So we've got a good system now. We basically have like a spreadsheet on our shared drive, shared folders. And I've got 2 people in my office who are like triaging department by department, working through the department admin personnel to really understand where the issues are and then either fix those issues in-house or escalate them to the Kayenta team. So yeah, that was my big takeaway from this. Go ahead.
I think my biggest takeaway is to make sure you are checking the premise at every step of the way. We spent probably 3 weeks going over what we thought was the question we were being asked, and it had to do with the word supervisor. They meant department head. We thought we were answering the question of who was the approver on a timesheet. So having those conversations and going back to, okay, what we think we heard you say would have saved us a huge headache.
The one other thing I'd throw out too is, and Heather and I were talking about this over the last couple of days, there's kind of like, there's multiple different approaches you can take. The approach that we're taking with our project is, hey, project vendor, you owe us a technical go live product in accordance with the timeline that you said, right? So our original go live date was actually Monday, March 24th. We pushed that by 3 weeks in order to get through March payroll, because payroll started, basically we start processing payroll the last day of the month. And I think it was like 2 months ago, I woke up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat and I was like, what are we doing? I'm like, we're going to go live on the week we start processing payroll. That's nuts, man. So we're going to get through March payroll, make sure everybody's got money in their bank account. And then we're gonna go live on April 14th. Because quite frankly, and I think everybody can relate to this, AP, hey, net 30, we cannot pay bills for a month, right? Hey, commissioners, you need a report, you're gonna have to wait. Putting money in people's bank accounts, if I don't do that, you won't see me at the annual conference in May because I'll be run out of town. So there's another lesson learned too, is when you set your go live date, really think about like, what are the requirements at go live? And actually that's something we're doing too. We've already messaged the county departments. You've got to get AP to us or your vouchers by the 4th. Otherwise your next AP run starts the week of the 21st. So, hey, we're just shutting down that week. The treasurer's office, they're still on cash tax. They're not going to export to us. That can wait. We are going to get payroll out the door for March, but we've already messaged that, hey, normally we try to fix payroll issues mid-month if we ever have any. That won't be an option in the month of April, fixing March's payroll. So there's some change management parts to that too. But and then the other thing that I'd say is that, we told Kayenta, hey, get us a technically ready product, but we're not necessarily going to implement all of the modules all at once, right? So on go live date, all business processes, policies, everything is still the same. In effect, we literally just went from version 7 to version 9. 2 weeks after that, when we get into May and everybody closes out their April time cards, that's when we want to start our Connect time entry conversion. Now, fortunately, we have Nova time through December. So if we're not at like 95% access and MLA issues validated, I'll push that to June. I've got a little bit of runway, but and then grants module for us, same thing, right? We're still working on our project code structure. We don't really have that countywide. Doesn't make the grants module very useful if you don't have that. So we have the grants module. It's been tested. It can work, but we're not going to implement that until probably like Q3, Q4 of this year. So we're taking that approach because I'm done paying $40,000 a month to Kayenta. So they owe us a product, and we'll do the business process changes through what I'm calling phase 2 and phase 3 of implementation.
So we're not fancy, but we are insane. So our idea is to go live with all of it, all at the same time.
Very brave. Money. Okay, so who's done one of these things and been completely on budget or under budget? If yes, you should probably start a consulting company and do this professionally. I'm pretty good at this stuff. I've got a little bit of a project management background, and we're still going to have about a 12% project variance. Most of that is due to the fact that, and they weren't really, I wouldn't say they weren't transparent. I think they were. I just didn't understand them. We didn't accurately account for the current year subscription fees and the new subscription fees, because as soon as they set up the environments, they sent us an invoice for, hey, you've got 9.2, so start paying your subscription fees, even though it was not functional. It was just a test environment, basically. So I assume most vendors probably work the same because they're in the business to make money. But that was something that took me by surprise, is that, you got something to add to that?
Yeah, we were surprised. We went through ours in 2016, and we're still implementing stuff. So what you find is, we thought there would be, like QuickBooks or stuff, that there'd be all these reports that would be off the shelf, good to go. And what we found is almost everything from our vendor ended up being a custom report. And so and they charge $200 an hour. And so, it starts adding up really quick. So if you make a mistake on something, or you haven't thought it through and you need to go back and rework stuff at $200 an hour, it doesn't take long to blow through your budget real quick. So spending the time up front, like you were saying, and really making sure all the stakeholders are there, and making sure you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it up front is going to save some of that. But it's mammoth projects like you guys are doing that it's hard to account for everything. So at 12%, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'll take it. Nobody's yelling at me for this yet. The other thing that I'll say too is, and I think you nailed it with your stakeholders, right? So our longest, and fortunately, Kayenta, they've eaten some of the money on this. The longest and most challenging case that we had was for warrants redemption. Our treasurer's office and cash tax, when they get the bank file back, they get to hit a button. They hit a button and it pulls the data from the warrants when they were issued, and it goes whoop, and it reconciles them. They're done, right? Treasurer says to us, that is a critical must-have. Will not do manual redemption. We must have that button. Kayenta's like, we don't do that, and so we said, go build us a button. They did 30 hours, I think, is what they said. That is by far our longest incident. The ticket was open for 4 months. I mean, it is like scrolling through the email chain to get down to like the bottom is crazy. They probably, if they'd scoped it correctly, it probably would have been about a $20,000 or $30,000 change order. Fortunately, they did not, and they held to the $8,000 or whatever it was. So, but that was interesting, right? Like, it seemed like a little thing, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we can do that." And that ended up being our most challenging thing because of all the interfunding. And fortunately, I got a rock star budget and finance director. Well, he was the assistant. Now he's the full budget and finance director. But he's like not IT, but he understands the technical aspects of like how data moves through the tables. So he like was getting on calls with Kayenta, like, no, the thing you're doing, like, it functionally works, like the data moves, but it's not crediting and debiting the right things in the software. You're going to mess stuff up. So that was pretty cool. We had a question over here.
So I would just give a tip to make sure that you watch your deliverables and do not listen to what they say. They will try and sell you that is a new requirement. No, it is not. Check the requirements, check the statement of work. It's in the change order, the no cost change order, because they were late on go live. And they will tell us, oh, that's new. No, it is not. So push back on that. And our auditor will pay them when they're done.
Very good. Hold them accountable. I like it. We've talked about most of the stuff. Yeah, different next. We got another question right here. Comment.
It's more for Thurston. Why the switch from Munis to?
So one of the main objectives was one software system that was a single point of data for everyone shared. We had a separate Munis for GL. We had Eden for payroll. We had Questica for budget. We had CAMS for public works. And getting all of those integrated in one system, which sounds easy. And we're almost there. So budget's supposed to be going live in April. Just finishing testing.
Here's this roles and permissions. This is how we did it. I don't know. This is probably like, there's definitely like lessons learned and things that I'm like, we should have done that differently. This would be something that I'm pretty proud of. Setting everybody up in a tiered structure with different access levels was definitely helpful. And we did that pretty early in the project too. So that was our methodology of moving from a system that 15 people used to 400 people and having the right amount of access, but also the right amount of controls in terms of not giving people who didn't need access higher level of access than they needed. So that's how we did it. Kayenta, I think, stole our idea because their EVP saw this and he was like, yeah, you need to send me that. So I did. So they'll probably make some money off this in the future, but good for them. These are just some business process things. I don't know whose AP works like this, where basically they go out and buy a thing and then they give you a voucher and you pay the thing that they already bought. Whose AP works like that? Yours. Does everybody see the same problem that I do with that? Which is like, you go buy a thing that's not compliant or it's out of budget or you didn't follow public procurement law. And then I either have to pay your bill or I have to say, I'm not going to pay your bill and you eat the cost. My opinion, that is a very flawed system. So, and I don't know if anybody has any commentary on that, but yeah, it has caused issues in our courthouse before, and so we want to move to this process, which looks really complicated, but basically anything above $5,000, we would implement a PRPO process. We're going to be delayed on this until about Q3, Q4 of this year because Kayenta's Connect Finance, which is where we want to route all the AP process for the departments, does not have an invoice batching feature. And so if you can't batch your invoices, that's going to be a nightmare for AP. So we are not going to be able to do that at Go Live, but when that feature comes online, which they're going to do it anyways for all of their clients. So it's not a change order. We'll implement that as well. And the reason we chose $5,000 is because $5,000 is, it was kind of a cutoff point. We did some analysis. We're like, okay, what could we reasonably review and approve for compliance and budget and turn around to departments within 24 hours? That's what I've committed to. So that was like a volume thing, but then also it's kind of a threshold of like, if you're under $5,000, I mean, it's still a lot of money, but I feel like that's a reasonable threshold that I can theoretically get from somebody's paycheck over a period of time, as opposed to if you go out and like right now and you do something that's non-compliant at $40,000 or $50,000, you're going to ruin somebody's life over that if you really hold them to it and say we're not paying that bill. And so that was our methodology. I don't know if anybody's got any opinions or better ideas, but I think there was a comment.
My question was for the counties that don't do it the way that Brian was explaining, if they have any advice on how to switch that process, because the findings come back to us. So.
Okay, say it louder.
So Brian was just mentioning that people will purchase things and then send the auditor's office the invoice, and then there could be budget constraints or the process of doing it correctly. Are there any counties that do it the opposite, where they get permission first or go through the correct procedures before sending the auditor's office the invoice? Because we will then have to either reject the invoice or pay it.
So the difference between these two processes, basically, like, does anybody do this, and how do you do it? I think is the question, right?
So we now have a procurement department, and the commission has worked over the last couple of years redeveloping our procurement policy. Given elected officials more authority for some higher level purchases, so I think it's $10,000 now. That was very recent. So I have the authority to make those purchases. Anything above that can be approved by, I don't know what his title is, the procurement guy. And then anything else has to go through procurement all the way to the board before purchase. Now, does that stop departments necessarily from purchasing things that they shouldn't? No, but they've built in some decent layers that make it, less frequent. Does that make sense?
That was one of our hiccups. We started with mandatory requisitions and purchase orders. What we did was provide relief for P cards, because we used to do requisition purchase orders for everything. If they used a P card and their limit was $1,000, they no longer needed to do that because it was imported every day, and we had an immediate turnaround and ability to reverse that. However, that was not a county-wide previous practice. And we did not do a great job of change management on that. So we had an optional pause about 2 months after we went live. because it was slowing down payments. However, we track late payments, discounts, and late fees and penalties. And it actually improved. But one of the hiccups that we had is that people had purchase orders in the system, and then when they had the temporary ability to suspend to go direct pay to invoice with adequate supporting documentation, they also left the purchase order there and went to direct pay. You can only spend $1 once. The system has that control. So their budget encumbrance was already there. So the system automatically does a budget check, even if they put it in both ways. So then we had over 1,000 to go get rid of, or to go delete the duplicates.
And when you say system, you mean Oracle, your new system. Show of hands, who's got a purchasing or procurement department at their county? So that would make sense, right? Between Benton and Thurston. We've looked at that model because right now it's just department based. It's like everybody else in the room, it's department-based purchasing. I think if you have that capability, you do have a little bit higher level of control over compliance and budget, whether that lives in auditor or not. I don't think in our current state, I know we just talked about budget before this, like we're not positioned to go hire people to create a procurement department. Nobody has the appetite for that. So this is kind of like our best possible solution is something like this. And yeah, there's going to be things that are below $5,000 that people do that are silly, but we're hoping that we can triage this a little bit and hopefully not have bigger issues. So this was timekeeping and job codes. So sort of like Thurston County, we're all GL codes except for our public works and our public health department, who have a pretty well built out job code structure. This slide has changed a little bit from when I created it. Originally, we were going to try to get job codes done whole county wide and have everything in time entry go to job codes. We're now looking at just putting basically Band-Aid labels and filters over the GL codes. The main point of this is we don't want roads crew guy or line deputy guy having to figure out which GL code their respective pay goes to. So we've had some other issues with time entry too. Like I don't know if anybody's prosecutor's office has ever gotten on you guys about L&I rules and punch clocks. Kyanta's original time entry module, or like in its non customizable state, is block hour entry. So you just, I worked 4 hours today. I worked 4.25 hours, whatever, right down to the 15 minutes. However, prosecutor's office came back and said for hourly employees, that is not good enough. We can't trust our employees to do their own math. So therefore you need either a punch button that they click, or you need to enter actual start and end time. And so what we got Kyanta to do for us, which I think they already had on their roadmap because they didn't charge us a change order, was to do an actual start and end time that auto calculates for hourly employees. But we also have departments out there this is kind of an interesting independent elected scenario. Public Works came to us and said, we're not doing that. We're doing block hours for all employees. And I said, I'm the auditor. I'm not the prosecutor. So if you've requested this, I'm going to authorize it because I don't see an issue with it. You get to be a manager and you take it up with the prosecutor's office if anybody has any issues. So we'll see how that plays out. But right now, that's my independent elected position. So I think. Okay, cool. That was a lot. Really, really light topic here. Anybody have any other questions, feedback? Anybody got any advice for me on my go live in 2.5 weeks? Huh?
Hello.
I was just curious on the last comment you made. Does your system not let you do a start time and a block time like ours does? I designed making sure payroll was start at 8 o'clock and then do 8 hours, no end time, because then it plays with this department does a 1 hour lunch break. This one wants to do 45. This one does 30 minutes. I'm not building that in the system. So I just did start time, no end time, just duration.
What if somebody goes home early?
then it would be start at 8 o'clock, only work 6 hours.
And then they would just put in 6 hours.
Mhm.
Did they?
Yeah,
Did
just
they? Did they
duration, and then they
Okay.
can put another start time, and then 2 hours of sick.
okay.
I don't know if
Our system doesn't. It's what it allows you to do is we can configure. We, an auditor, can at the subgroup level can say you guys are going to be on block hours or you're going to be on start stop time. And so we are just leaving that up to departments. So Public Works has come to us and said we want block hours because we do all our job codes and it doesn't make sense for us to start stop. We want to just be able to say 2 hours to this project, 2 hours to this project, whatever. Sheriff, I think, is going to do the same thing. There was a whole discussion, which quite frankly, man, I'm just going to get on my soapbox for a second. Can't help myself. Part of the discussion that really bothered me is around the punch card topic. Is people feel there was some that felt that like having the punch card was like the magic control for like making sure employees aren't stealing time, right? Because they have to push that button. And I'm like, listen, guys, I'm like, an employee could still push that button and go and hide in the break room and not do any work. Like it's ultimately on management and leader engagement to supervise your employees. Like don't hide behind the punch button as like, oh no, they punched the clock. So, we're all good. Nobody's stealing time. So that really, that part of the conversation I am passionate about.
Okay.
Anyone?
We're almost finished with the conference of them. I love this because that means we have engagement and interaction. I love that we're using the mics a lot.
You mentioned that your sheriffs wouldn't be able to put in their GL codes. So are you going to have to put those in manually? They wouldn't know which GL code. You said you blocked that out.
No, I think I might have misspoke. Basically, right now, I'll go back to the picture. So, like, right here is like this is the assessor's office 10 in the general fund. This is every GL code. If you scroll down, it's all 6,000 lines there. It's not filtered to just this is a sample pay card from the budget and finance director, and so like this is all of them. What we wanted to do was basically make sure that just the sheriff's salary GL code was available. And then on the side right, salaries right there. So the sheriff would know. It wouldn't say like, oh no, I'm going to code my time to supplies or something today.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you.
Heather, do you got anything?
The system allows you to put the bars code to the position or the employee. So this would be more for folks who either job cost or who split their time in some sort of non-standard way. So we could do it as, if it's always 75-25, we can put that in the back end of the position. But if sometimes it's an hour and sometimes it's, 15 minutes or whatever, this allows for that flexibility. What about like the swing shift and graveyard? Are they putting that in themselves or overtime?
Schedules. Okay. Yes. Schedules have been a challenge. Our sheriffs are 28-day 410 schedules. And we had to get some help setting that up from the vendor. And I think that it's sort of still an open ticket as far as like your graveyard and stuff, because it wants it to be tied to certain times when you set up the scheduling. I think we're just about at a solution, but it's also why we were looking at the block hours as opposed to start and stop time for sheriff. Because if the system just knows that, basically over the course of 28 days and they need to work this many hours and they enter hours, that might be a solution. It's complex with the sheriffs because they're 24/7 and they work weird hours. So it's a good question and sort of still an open issue, but we're working on it.
Okay. Is that wrap? Is that a wrap? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. You've got us all ready to go with.
Okay, so we're just going to take a quick 5-minute break and then we'll get started with our final session in regards to W-9s and 1099s and best practices for that. So let's meet back at 10:40.
Right now.
S1.
All right, we're going to get started in a few minutes. If everybody wants to kind of find their seats again. All right. Well, I think we'll get started with our very last session. And in my opinion, Derek's made me wait all the way to the end of the conference for the best class, because I'm very excited for this one, because every year we come around to 1099s, we have 7,000 questions. We don't really have anywhere to go ask, because the IRS is just this big, huge conglomerate of internet that is a searching function that really doesn't search anything. So I am very excited for Amina to do her presentation, and I will let you introduce yourself and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, we're keeping the best for last is what we've decided to call this. How many of you have dealt with the IRS? Just a show of hands. Many. Oh, okay. Beautiful. Very good. So this is relevant. I'm a tax senior manager with Moss Adams. I've been with the firm, gosh, I always have to do the math, about 18 years, so a while. I've seen a few things, dealt with the IRS quite a bit. Man, black hole. It's really a black hole. So let's get started. So from W-9 to 1099s is a fun one. So we'll talk about the form W-9 itself, go through the form. We'll talk about some of the boxes, what they mean, some common errors that we tend to see as practitioners, and then we'll dive deeper into what the payments are to U.S. persons, also payments to foreign persons, because we're seeing that a lot more coming up and popping up. And so there's a different form, there's a different gathering form, there's a different filing that you have to do that's separate from the 1099. So, all right, W-9. Okay, you can see it good. Perfect. So here's the actual form itself. The last update that the IRS has made to it was back in March of 2024. It's that little box right under the W-9 that indicates the most recent updates when it's made. The IRS has, every once in a while, will make some updates to this form, and you can kind of tell what year you're using and what year those individuals, those recipients, payees are using as well, payers. We'll start with box 1. So the first thing you want to do is anytime you onboard a vendor, you look at your contract, right? It's like, okay, who have we onboarded? And then let's give them this W-9 to fill out. So we have information about, do we have to do backup withholdings? What's the address? What's the EIN or social security number that we need to use as we work with them? So the first thing you want to do is look at box 1 and make sure that actually ties out to the contract or the agreement that you have, because guess what? Sometimes, a lot of time we find that people have different names or use their DBAs or use single member LLCs if they're sole proprietor. So there's kind of a mix of different types of names you might see. So you want to make sure that that aligns with what you've received in your contract. That's the first thing. Little caveat here with when you are dealing with a sole proprietor who has set up a single member LLC, the sole proprietor's name is what you would list and what you would expect to see on box 1, not the LLC name. So if they are using their LLC, their business, you would put the DBA or the business name down on line 2 instead. So that's the number one mistake we tend to see quite a bit, is if individuals have their own businesses, makes legal sense to have a separate LLC just for protections there, to set that up and have that be the entity that you're actually doing business with in your contracts. Then box 3A is really where the organization or the individual, that kind of depends on who you're working with, selects whether they're individuals, so a proprietor, a C corporation, an S corporation, a partnership, a trust or an estate, or an LLC. So an LLC can elect to be different type of taxation structures. So they could be either a C corporation, they could elect to be an S corporation, or they can file as a partnership. So you kind of need to look at that a little bit and better understand what sort of tax selections they've made, because that kind of ultimately decides what you do with the 1099s, whether they're subject to backup withholding, and kind of different rules around that, which we'll talk a little bit about that. So that's box 3A. Box 3B is actually what's new this year, or as of last year. I don't anticipate that being a big thing that you'll actually see your vendors be checking, because you're not a partnership, you're a governmental agency. So that box should probably be unchecked if you're getting one from a vendor. Questions so far? Kind of the basics right now. All right, and then box 4, we'll talk about that a little bit in greater detail, but essentially box 4 is where organizations, and this box kind of came about back in 2011, I think. So a little while ago now, a few years, feels like yesterday, but the reality is it was a few years ago, where organizations are filling out specific codes that the IRS has designated them as for the exemption pay code and also the FATCA exemption codes. I don't anticipate FATCA applying at all to your vendors, just because that's more of a financial institution thing. But you might see them fill that out regardless, which is fine. It's okay if they fill it out. And then part 1 is where you have your taxpayer identification number. So this is one piece, is if the individual, so if you have an individual who has a single member LLC that they're working with, you should see them fill out their social security number, not the employer identification number of that single member LLC. That's another common mistake that we tend to see as well, is people will fill that out and then ultimately they'll get either an IRS notice or you'll get an IRS notice where there's like a matching issue. So that happens quite a bit. So if you are working with an individual via a single member LLC, make sure they're filling out the social security box, not the EIN box. Yes, question. Oh, still not working.
Great. Here we go. Try this one.
So if it's a disregarded entity, so there are 2 individual social security numbers. So like if you have a spouse, right? So
they have to pick one of them.
But they could pick either one.
Yeah. They could pick either one, especially if they're filing a joint return. They just need to pick one person. Yeah. Good question. So one of the questions I received when we were kind of thinking about this topic is like, how frequently should you get these W-2s or W-9s? It kind of depends on a few factors. So if you have some that are really, really old, like if you have a vendor that you've worked with for many years and they give you one like 10, 20 years ago, you probably should get a new one from them, because some of these boxes didn't exist at the time when they filled it out. So as you are developing a process or procedures, which I know you kind of talked about that with earlier in a few earlier sessions with procedures and processes, one of those could be actually making a process of how frequently should we look at our W-9s and compare them, especially if you've had some old ones. Technically, it's up to the vendors to actually provide you with new information if something has changed, but it doesn't hurt as you, the one who's actually paying, to confirm, because you're most likely going to be the one who gets that first notice that says, hey, there's a matching issue or there's an issue with this employer identification number. So at that point in time, you're actually supposed to also give it to them, a new W-9 to fill out, and it's like, hey, fill this out again. And if again they gave you wrong information, there's kind of processes and steps around that. So it's kind of up to you to decide what makes the most sense for your organization. It kind of depends on how many vendors you have, how many employees you have. What does your staffing look like, right? Do you have actually the capacity from an administrative perspective to keep track of those W-9s and those vendors? And how frequently do you want to kind of accomplish that? So it's really up to you and your policies to get those. All right, let's talk about some more common things that we see. So as I mentioned, what's new is that box 3B. I don't see that applying to you, so I'm not going to cover that into great detail, but as I mentioned, some of the most common errors is the wrong EIN, social security number, not listing the right people, right entities on either box 1 or box 2. Already talked about that single member LLC situation. And then another one that's coming up more frequently is using this form for non-US persons. So we'll talk more about that. But if the individual is not a US individuals or US person is kind of loosely used here because it could be organizations as well. That could be a common error or just a bad address. So as you are sending out your 1099s, you're getting a return receipt saying, hey, we've changed your address or this is no longer deliverable. So that happens as well. And do please ask questions as I'm going through these sections. Box 4. So that's the one that kind of came about back in, let's see, I wrote in my notes. Actually, it's August 2013. So it's a little bit more newer than that. The FATCA box kind of became a thing. Shouldn't really apply to your organizations, but it's out there. So if you are seeing W-9s without it, they're probably old and probably should be updated for that. But essentially, box 4 has 2 boxes now. One is talking about the exemption payee code, which is essentially claiming the exemption from backup withholdings, or the FATCA one, which means Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, which applies to persons for accounts maintained outside of the U.S. For certain foreign financial institutions. So again, like as I mentioned, probably not applicable to you, but the other box will be applicable to you with regards to the exemption code. So that's why we'll kind of dive into those codes and what they actually mean. And there's like a whole list that the IRS has described. Okay. So corporations, corporations have a lot of caveats. Let's just say that. It's like, well, who do we have to supply these W-9s to? Who do we have to supply 1099s to? And there's some specific rules with regards to backup withholding as well that apply to corporations that if your vendor is set up as one. So typically they are exempt from backup withholdings for certain payments, including interest and dividends. However,